Signs. We see them every day. Traffic signs, promotional signs, informational signs, signs of every kind, all communicating some sort of message to all sorts of viewers. The consequences of responding to most signs are obvious. The consequences of ignoring others can be deadly. For close to 40 years, the John Birch Society has kept a watchful eye on the agendas and progression of the United Nations. The Society has one of the largest research facilities of its kind, which also houses countless articles and documents that analyze and detail UN activity. Using this information, along with commentaries from a host of authorities, some of which you are about to hear, the John Birch Society presents the United Nations, a look into the future. Continuing its practice of financing abortion, the United Nations will not only promote and even enforce abortion as a population control measure, it will criminalize any activity opposing the practice. All pro-life organizations will be closed down, their membership lists confiscated, and the identity of their supporters cataloged as persons to be watched. Anyone continuing to protest abortion will be the recipient of punitive action. Should the UN decide, for whatever reason, that a larger population is desirable, then its pro-abortion policy will suddenly be reversed. In a totalitarian society, people are considered commodities, just like automobiles or widgets, with government planners determining the desired number and then fashioning policies accordingly. Morality is not a factor.
The United Nations has given NGO or non-governmental organization status to all of the very militant pro-abortion population control organizations from the United States and Europe and from around the world, most of whom, many of whom at least, are funded by tax-exempt foundations like Carnegie, Ford, Rockefeller foundations, and by the U.S. government.
The United Nations is pro-abortion. It is that not only in principle, not only in its policies, but also in practice. It is estimated that 50 million babies are killed every year. This is in no small measure due to the United Nations and to both its policy of promoting it intellectually as well as promoting it in the practical field.
So they're very much involved in population control, which means that they're pro-abortion and they support abortion worldwide, both by funding and by changing the laws to support abortion. So if there's anybody in this country who believes in the sanctity of life, they should question the authenticity of the United Nations.
Parents who have chosen to teach their children at home or in private schools will be notified that they must now enroll them in government schools. No exceptions will be allowed, for totalitarian policymakers intend to have the state supplant the family as the most important institution in the heart and mind of the child.
There has been historically an irreducible conflict between the state and the family. They each have contended with the other for primacy in human affairs, because to the extent that the family functions properly, there's very little for the state to do. And every state is, of course, run by men and women who want to increase their powers over other human beings. The way you do that is by giving the state more and more to do. To the extent that the family operates efficiently and properly, the state is left without a whole lot to do, so it cannot expand. It can only expand by absorbing functions which are carried out by non-government entities. The family, of course, is the most important. The church is another.
Speaker and author of What's Right for All Americans is Zola Foster.
I taught high school for 33 years. 22 years were in Watts, South Central Los Angeles. I have seen firsthand the influence of the United Nations on our public education system. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, is the education arm of the United Nations. UNESCO is fast becoming an international school board. This means parents will have no choice, parents will have no say. All children will be under the direction of UNESCO. In 1949, UNESCO published a 10-part series for teachers entitled Toward World Understanding. Let me read just one statement. As we have pointed out, it is frequently the family that infects the child with extreme nationalism. The school should therefore use the means described earlier to combat family attitudes. That's UNESCO.
Founder and principal of East Moline Christian School in Illinois, Reverend James R. Patrick has authored America 2000, Goals 2000, Moving the Nation Educationally to a New World Order. His book analyzes the dangerous implications of Goals 2000, the UN-approved Educate America Act.
If we continue to put the Goals 2000 program in, which is an international program, we're going to destroy the very philosophy that this nation was built upon. So the humanistic philosophy, the statist philosophy that has permeated our curriculum, is absolutely destroying our young people. The American people must run and control their own educational program. To do that, they have got to have the control at the local level, which means that where they've consolidated the schools, moved it to the state to the federal, and now the federal is merging into the United Nations, and the philosophy that is coming down through is absolutely destructive of the ideals that our nation was founded upon. We've got to start right at that area and go back to realizing that we're putting in an international educational program. It is coming down through the United Nations. That has got to be eliminated first.
We need to go back to the basics. We need to build families, not divide families. And most of all, we must get our nation out of the United Nations.
The right to keep and bear arms will be abolished. Those retaining ownership of weapons will be required to turn in all arms they possess or face severe penalties. Organizations built upon this God-given right will be raided, and all their records, including membership lists, will be seized and forwarded to world government officials. Persons whose names appear in these records will be visited to assure that all of their weapons have been delivered to the authorities. Aaron Zellman is chairman of Jews for the Preservation of Firearms and has authored numerous publications, including Gun Control, Gateway to Tyranny.
Every single genocide has had one thing in common. First, the government will register firearms, and then confiscate firearms, and then demonize a targeted group of people. And you create in the public's mind the attitude, well, if the government does something forceful to these people, that's all right, they probably had it coming. And then, once the government has disarmed its targeted group, then it's easy for the government to murder those people. It's called genocide. Registration is the key. It is so crucial that if you want to control people and you want to get their firearms from them, you have to know where the firearms are. And the way to do that systematically is through registration. The United States is engaged in doing the very same thing that's been done in Canada, where they've been disarming people, Australia, where they've been disarming people, and the United Nations has had an active hand in this.
I believe those individuals in this country, and there are plenty, who believe that we should have the right to own and bear arms, ought to be concerned with what's happening in the United Nations, because they are a threat to us. They would confiscate our guns. There have been proposals made at some of their conventions where they would literally repeal the Second Amendment. And I think that everybody should be alert to this and realize that this is not just fun and games, and this is just not a discussion club that we're dealing with.
Activity. Using this information, along with commentaries from a host of authorities, some of which you are about to hear, the John Birch Society presents the United Nations, a watchful eye on the agendas and progression of the United Nations. The Society has one of the largest research facilities of its kind, which also houses countless articles and documents that analyze and detail UN activities. For close to 40 years, the John Birch Society has kept signs. We see them every day. Traffic signs, promotional signs, informational signs, signs of every kind, all communicating some sort of message to all sorts of viewers. The consequences of responding to most signs are obvious. The consequences of ignoring others can be deadly.